He wasn't supposed to notice me, but he always did. It started with the smallest glances, the kind you pretend not to see but secretly crave. He'd catch my eyes over the fence, just long enough to make my pulse stumble. There was nothing extraordinary about the way he looked at me, at least not to anyone else. But to me, it felt deliberate, like he saw too much, the hesitation behind my smile, the restlessness I tried to hide. He was older, not in a way that made him distant, but in a way that made him sure of himself. Every movement, every word carried a quiet confidence that made people listen. He didn't chase attention, it followed him. Maybe that's what drew me in, that unshakable calm he wore like armor while I was still figuring myself out. We were neighbors, separated by a driveway, yet divided by something much bigger. He belonged to a world of late-night business calls, tailored shirts, and people who seemed to know what they were doing. I belonged to a world of uncertainty, unfinished plans, and daydreams that always felt too far away. Still, there was something magnetic about the space between us. He'd always noticed the things no one else did. The time I came home drenched in rain and tried to laugh it off. The mornings I'd forget to open my curtains, and he'd leave a text, "Sunlight helps." The small gestures felt harmless, maybe even friendly, but they carried a quiet intensity that I couldn't explain. He wasn't supposed to notice, yet he always did, like he was tuned to a frequency no one else could hear. And I noticed him too, more than I wanted to admit. The way his laughter carried through the thin walls at night, deep and warm. The way his voice softened when he spoke to his dog, or when he offered to help carry my groceries without waiting for an answer. He had that kind of presence, gentle but commanding, like gravity. Sometimes, I'd wonder if he knew how easily he could unsteady me, how one look could unravel my carefully built distance. I told myself it was just curiosity, admiration, maybe, but deep down I knew it was something else. Something I didn't want to name because naming it would make it real. There was a moment, small, quiet, but unforgettable. I was locking my door one evening when he stepped out of his house, eyes catching mine under the fading sunlight. No words, no smiles, just silence and a shared awareness that neither of us could explain away anymore. He broke the moment with a simple line. "You always look like you're about to run." What? And just like that, every wall I'd built felt see-through. He wasn't supposed to notice me, but somehow he saw everything. Older, calm, and dangerously sure of himself. He ruined my peace with just one look. There was something about him that silenced the room without him even trying. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice or fight for attention. It came to him naturally, like gravity pulling everything in his orbit. I noticed it the first day I saw him. The measured way he moved, the quiet confidence that filled the air around him. He wasn't loud, he wasn't arrogant, but there was danger in his calm, the kind that made you want to look twice, even when you knew you shouldn't. He was my neighbor, always just a few steps away. Every morning, I'd see him standing on his porch with a coffee mug in hand, sunlight cutting across his face. He'd nod once if our eyes met, never saying a word. Yet that one look would stay with me for the rest of the day. It was ridiculous, really, the way one glance could throw me off balance, make me forget what I was doing. But he had that power, maybe he knew it. He was older, not by decades, but enough to feel it. Enough for his silence to feel heavy with experience, with stories he'd never tell. He carried a kind of peace that I didn't have, a stillness that only comes when you've seen too much and learned when not to speak. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. He knew who he was, and I couldn't help but want to know him too. But the problem was, peace is addictive until it isn't yours. The more I noticed him, the less I noticed anything else. Every sound he made, the soft slam of his car door, the quiet hum of his voice on late-night phone calls, started to fill the silence I used to find comforting. He was becoming a habit I didn't mean to form. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me too, not for long, but long enough to wonder what he was thinking. His gaze wasn't invasive. It was knowing, like he could see through the layers I showed the world. The calmness that once seemed so distant now felt personal, dangerous. It wasn't about words or gestures. It was the tension in the quiet, the kind that made you forget how to breathe. There was one evening, the sky tinted gold, air heavy with the smell of rain. I stepped out to grab a parcel, and he was there, leaning against his car, sleeves rolled up, watching the clouds roll in. He smiled, not the polite kind, but slow, like he was fully aware of the effect it would have. My chest tightened, my thoughts scattered, and for a moment, it felt like the world narrowed to just that, his eyes on me. That was all it took. One look, and the calm I built around myself shattered quietly, beautifully, irreversibly. He didn't touch me. He didn't speak. But he ruined my peace with just one look. He was my neighbor, but it felt like he lived under my skin. It started innocently. A hello over the fence, a polite smile in the hallway, the kind of small talk that neighbors make just to fill the silence. But silence never really stayed silent around him. Somehow, his presence had a way of lingering long after he was gone. I'd hear his door close and still feel like he was standing behind me, close enough to touch, close enough to unsettle every calm thought I try to keep. He moved in during late summer, the kind of season that makes everything feel alive. And yet, there was something quiet about him, something controlled. He spoke little, smiled rarely, but when he did, it felt deliberate, like he'd chosen that moment carefully. Every look, every gesture felt intentional. He didn't just exist next door. He occupied space in a way that demanded awareness. And I was aware, too aware. Sometimes I catch glimpses of him, watering his plants at dusk, shirt sleeves rolled up, completely lost in his own world. I tell myself I was just being observant, curious maybe, but deep down I knew it wasn't just that. It was fascination, the kind that crept in quietly, disguised as coincidence. He had this calm energy, but beneath it, there was something darker. Not dangerous exactly, but heavy, like he'd seen things that left marks on him. There was a depth in his eyes that made you want to ask questions, even though you knew you shouldn't. I never did, but I thought about it. Too often. The strange part was how easily he seemed to read me. He'd notice things no one else ever did. Rough day, he'd ask casually, just by looking at me. Or, you been up late again. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, calm and certain, like he'd been paying attention longer than I realized. Soon, I started noticing him in everything. The smell of his cologne drifting through the hallway, the sound of his laughter echoing faintly through the walls. Even when I wasn't looking for him, he was there. It was as if he'd taken up residence, not just next door, but inside my thoughts, my pulse, my quiet moments. I told myself it was harmless, a passing intrigue, but it wasn't. It was something that tightened around me slowly, invisibly, until one night it snapped. It was raining. I was struggling with the lock on my door, soaked and frustrated. And then, suddenly, he was there, umbrella in hand, calm as ever. "You'll catch a cold," he said, stepping closer, holding the umbrella over both of us. I should have thanked him, stepped back, kept the distance we both pretended existed. But I didn't. Neither did he. For a second, just one, our eyes met, and everything I tried to suppress came rushing up. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't need to, because in that silence, I finally understood he wasn't just my neighbor. He was under my skin. I told myself he was off limits. Then he smiled. It was supposed to be simple. He was older, distant, the kind of man who carried his own silence like armor. The kind who made you respect boundaries without saying a word. From the beginning, I knew he wasn't someone I should get close to. Not because he was cruel or arrogant, but because he was too composed, too self-assured. The kind of calm that could unravel someone like me, who was still learning how to stand still. He lived 2 doors down. Our paths crossed often, sometimes by accident, sometimes because I secretly wanted them to. A shared elevator ride, a polite morning, a casual exchange of packages mistakenly delivered to the wrong address. Every moment felt small, meaningless, but underneath it all, there was a pull, quiet, undeniable. He was always collected, almost unreadable. There was something about the way he looked at people, patient, observant, as if he could see through the noise of what they said and straight into what they meant. It was intimidating, but it was also magnetic. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything, that I was just noticing, not feeling, that he was just a neighbor, nothing more. And then one evening, everything changed. I was coming home late, exhausted, fumbling with my keys when I heard his voice behind me. "You always forget to look up when you're tired." I turned, startled, and there he was, leaning casually against the wall, hands in his pockets, the faintest hint of amusement in his eyes. I should have laughed it off, made some excuse, walked away. But then he smiled. Not the polite smile he gave everyone else. This one was slower, softer, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him the same way I'd been pretending not to. It wasn't just a smile, it was an undoing. Every rule I'd drawn for myself, every silent reminder to stay detached, all of it melted in that one fleeting curve of his lips. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Forgot that the hallway light flickered above us, that the night was still and quiet. All I could think about was the warmth in his gaze, the steadiness of it, the way it felt like he was saying something without speaking at all. "I told myself you were trouble," he said finally, his tone almost teasing. "Then why are you smiling?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer, just kept that infuriating, devastating smile, the one that made my heart race and my mind go quiet. That was the moment I realized danger doesn't always come in storms or chaos. Sometimes it comes wrapped in calm voices and steady eyes. Sometimes it looks like a man standing 2 doors down, smiling like he already knows what's coming. He was supposed to be off limits, but his smile didn't ask for permission. Every time I heard his door open, my heart forgot how to behave. It was ridiculous, really, the way something as simple as the click of a door could make my pulse race. It wasn't like he ever did anything to deserve that kind of reaction. He wasn't loud or flirtatious or even particularly friendly. He was quiet, the kind of man who moved through the world with purpose but without noise. Still, somehow, he occupied every corner of my attention without even trying. He was my neighbor, the one who kept to himself, the one who never seemed rushed or flustered. Everything about him was measured, controlled. He'd come home at the same time every evening, the sound of his footsteps steady, his keys always jingling right before the lock turned. It was the most ordinary sound, yet to me, it felt like a heartbeat I didn't know I was waiting for. At first, I told myself it was just curiosity. He was mysterious, sure, older, calm, and always dressed like he had somewhere important to be. Anyone would notice him. But this wasn't just noticing anymore. It was anticipation, obsession, maybe. Every time I heard that door, every time his presence brushed against the edge of mine, something inside me shifted. There were small interactions, brief hellos, passing nods, polite smiles that lasted just a little too long. He had this way of making eye contact that left you wondering what he wasn't saying. It wasn't bold. It was patient. He didn't demand your attention. He waited for it, and that was far more dangerous. One night, I heard his door open later than usual. The hallway light spilled through the gap, soft and golden. I froze, pretending to scroll through my phone, though my heartbeat was far too loud to hide. His footsteps slowed as he passed by, and then, for a second, he stopped. I could feel his gaze even before I looked up. When I finally did, he was already watching me, that calm, unreadable expression on his face. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. His voice was low, smooth, the kind that doesn't ask, it observes. I shook my head, managing a small smile. "You too." He didn't answer right away, just tilted his head, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. Something like that. And then he kept walking, leaving behind nothing but silence and the faint scent of his cologne. Something dark, subtle, maddeningly familiar. The moment should have ended there, but it didn't. For hours afterward, I replayed it. The sound of his voice, the calm in his eyes, the quiet between us that said more than words ever could. I started to realize it wasn't the door that made my heart race. It was him, his presence, his timing, the way he moved through my world like he belonged there, quietly, confidently, completely unaware of the chaos he caused in me. Every time I heard his door open, it wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can shake you the most. Keynote 6. He didn't just look at me. He studied me like I was something he couldn't quite understand but didn't want to stop trying. It wasn't the kind of attention that screamed for notice. It was quiet, deliberate, unsettling in its precision. Most people look at you to listen, to respond, to pass the time. But he looked at me like he was searching for something beneath the surface, something I hadn't even shown the world yet. It was unnerving at first, almost invasive. Then it became addictive. He wasn't loud or charming in the usual way. He was the kind of man who carried silence like it belonged to him. Calm, composed, and somehow always in control. But that stillness made every small movement matter. The way his eyes lingered for a fraction too long. The way he tilted his head, like he was filing away everything I said, every flicker of expression I failed to hide. He noticed everything, the tremor in my voice when I was nervous, the sarcasm I used when I wanted to protect myself, the way I looked away when I was lying. And what made it worse, or maybe better, was that he never tried to hide it. He didn't pretend to be casual. He didn't look away when I caught him watching. If anything, he seemed curious about the fact that I'd noticed. Like he wanted me to know he was paying attention. There were moments that felt suspended, like time itself hesitated between us. In those seconds, words didn't matter. He'd stand there, close but not too close, expression unreadable, eyes soft but piercing. It wasn't flirtation, not exactly. It was more like recognition, like he saw something in me that mirrored something in him, and it pulled us both toward a line we knew better than to cross. He asked questions that no one else did, not personal, but disarming in their simplicity. Why do you pause before you answer? Do you always laugh when you're uncomfortable? Each one peeled away a layer I didn't know I'd been wearing. I wanted to tell him to stop, to look away, to leave things untouched, but a part of me wanted him to keep going. Because beneath that calm, steady gaze I felt seen, not in the usual shallow way people claim to see you, but deeply, almost too deeply. It was terrifying and beautiful at once. One night, we crossed paths outside our doors again. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of distant city noise between us. I tried to walk past, but he stopped me with that same look, steady, unreadable, endless. You always look like you're about to run, he said softly. Maybe I should, I replied. He smiled then, faint, knowing. Maybe that's why I can't look away. And just like that, I understood. He didn't just study me to figure me out. He did it because he couldn't help himself. And I didn't run, because neither could I. Keynote 7. He spoke softly, but every word felt like a touch. Careful, intentional, impossible to ignore. His voice never raised, never rushed. It carried a calm that could quiet a storm. He didn't need to command attention. It came to him naturally. Every syllable was deliberate, as if he weighed each one before letting it fall into the space between us. And in that space, silence wasn't empty. It was charged, heavy with something neither of us wanted to name. He had this way of talking that made ordinary things sound intimate. A comment about the weather, a casual question about my day, they all felt layered, like there was something beneath the words that only I could hear. It wasn't what he said that stayed with me. It was how he said it. Low, even steady, a tone that wrapped around me like warmth I didn't know I was missing. I remember one evening in particular. The power had gone out. The building was wrapped in a quiet darkness, the kind that makes every breath sound too loud. I stepped into the hallway with my phone flashlight, and there he was, leaning against his door, candlelight flickering behind him. Guess we'll have to survive the old-fashioned way, he said, his voice calm, almost amused. I smiled, unsure how to respond. You say that like you've done this before. He chuckled softly, not loud, but deep enough to feel it. Maybe I have. The sound of his voice filled the hallway like music, soft but consuming. It was strange, how someone could speak so little yet say so much. I found myself standing there longer than I should have, just listening, not to his words, but to the quiet between them, to the meaning he didn't speak aloud. He talked about simple things, coffee, books, the rain tapping against his window. But there was something intimate about the way he looked at me while he spoke, as if every word was chosen for me alone. I could feel in the air that quiet current pulling us closer, not with force but with understanding. When I finally turned to leave, he said my name, softly, almost hesitant. And somehow, the way he said it made my chest tighten. He made it sound like a secret. "Be careful with the candlelight," he murmured. "It burns quicker than you think." It was a simple warning, but it landed differently. I felt it echo long after I'd closed my door. The weight of his voice, the warmth in it, the unspoken meaning that lingered between us. That's the thing about him. He didn't touch much, didn't need to. His words did it for him. They brushed against the edges of my thoughts, tracing paths I couldn't erase even if I tried. He spoke softly, but it was never harmless. Because every time he did, I felt it, the quiet unraveling of my composure, thread by thread. And I began to wonder, if words could feel this way, what would happen if he ever actually touched me?